My name is Alex. I'm 32 years old, and my hands were trembling as I signed the check. It was for my entire inheritance, every last cent my grandmother had left me. I handed it to my wife, Sarah, who was 30 years old, and watched as tears of pure relief streamed down her face. She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder, and in that moment I felt like a king. I had saved her. I had saved her family. But then her father told me the truth, and I realized my sacrifice wasn't an act of love, it was the price of my own blindness. Sarah and I had been married for 3 years, and they were the best 3 years of my life. She had this light about her, a way of making everything seem brighter. We were building a life together, planning for a future, saving up for our own home. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that always felt like enough. My world was simple and happy. My best friend, Mark, who is also 32, would always joke that I was the luckiest man alive. We'd grab a beer after work and he'd listen to me talk about Sarah for hours. He was my rock, the one person besides her that I trusted completely with my life. He knew how much I adored her. Then, about 6 months ago, I got the call that my grandmother had passed away. It was heartbreaking, but she left me a significant amount of money. It wasn't life-changing millions, but it was enough to buy a house, to start a family without worry. It felt like her final gift, a foundation for the future she always wanted for me. Just as I was starting to plan how to invest it, how to surprise Sarah with a down payment on a dream home, her world fell apart. She called me from work, hysterical. She could barely speak through the sobs. Her parents were losing their home, the one she grew up in, the one her grandfather built with his own hands. Her father, Robert, a proud man of 58 years old, had lost his job a year ago and had been hiding the depth of their financial problems. He'd taken out a second mortgage, and now the bank was foreclosing. They had 2 weeks to come up with an impossible amount of money or they would be out on the street. Seeing Sarah broken shattered me. Her beautiful light was gone, replaced by a constant gnawing anxiety. She couldn't eat, she couldn't sleep, she just stared into space, her eyes hollow. Her mother, Carol, a sweet woman of 56, tried to be strong, but I could see the terror behind her smile. I knew what I had to do. The money from my grandmother wasn't just mine, it was for our future, and Sarah's family was a part of that. I sat her down one evening and told her my decision. I was going to pay off the debt. All of it. Her initial reaction wasn't relief, it was protest. "No, Alex, you can't. That's your money, your future." But I insisted. "You are my future," I told her, holding her face in my hands. "Seeing you like this is killing me. We can rebuild. We'll save up again. But your family home? That's irreplaceable." She finally relented, her gratitude so overwhelming it felt like I could physically touch it. I called Mark to tell him. He was silent on the phone for a long moment. "Man, that's everything you have," he said, his voice laced with concern. "Are you absolutely sure about this? It just feels fast. Do you know all the details?" I got defensive. "It's for Sarah, Mark. I'd do anything for her. You know that." The day I transferred the money was surreal. We all went to the bank together, me, Sarah, and her parents. When the transaction was complete, her father shook my hand, his eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how we can ever repay you, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I just smiled and said, "We're family." That night, they threw a small dinner to celebrate. The house felt alive again. Laughter echoed in the halls that had been filled with dread just days before. Sarah looked at me with an adoration that made my chest ache with love. I had done it. I had fixed everything. I was their hero. As the evening wound down and guests started to leave, Robert pulled me aside. "Alex, can I have a word with you on the porch?" he asked. His tone was different now. The relief was gone, replaced by a heavy weight I couldn't identify. I followed him out into the cool night air, a strange knot forming in my stomach. He didn't look at me. He just stared out at the dark street, his shoulders slumped. "I saw the way you look at my daughter," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "And I see the man you are. You're a good man, Alex. Too good." He finally turned to face me, his eyes filled with a terrible sadness, a deep, painful pity. He took a deep breath, and the words that came next felt like they stopped my heart from beating. "You shouldn't have done this," he said, his voice cracking. "I have to tell you the truth. That money, it wasn't for the house. The house was paid off 6 months ago." The world tilted on its axis. The chirping of crickets in the yard suddenly sounded deafening, each one a tiny scream inside my head. I stared at her father, trying to make sense of his words, but they were just sounds, empty of meaning. Paid off? 6 months ago? My mind was a blank slate. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to whisper. My voice didn't sound like my own. It was thin, fragile, like a stranger's. Her father wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked down at his shoes, ashamed. "I had a problem, Alex. A gambling problem. I lost everything. Not the house. I lost my savings, my retirement. I was in deep with some very bad people." He finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "Sarah came up with the idea. She said you loved her enough, that you wouldn't ask questions." The blank slate in my mind cracked, and a flood of ice-cold realization poured in. Every sob, every sleepless night, every desperate look from my wife, it was a performance, a carefully crafted play designed to get my inheritance. The light I fell in love with wasn't a natural glow, it was a spotlight. She aimed at whatever she wanted, and this time she had aimed it at my grandmother's legacy. I didn't say another word to him. I turned, walked back into the house, right past my mother-in-law who was smiling at me, and past my wife who was laughing with a cousin. I saw her face, so full of joy, and all I felt was a hollow emptiness where my heart used to be. She saw me and her smile widened. "Hey, honey, you ready to go?" The drive home was silent. I could feel her looking at me, her brow probably furrowed with fake concern. "Is everything okay, Alex? You're so quiet." I didn't answer. I just kept my eyes on the road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every memory we had made together was now a scene in a play she had written, and I was the fool who didn't even know he was on stage. When we got inside our apartment, she tried to put her arms around me. "Talk to me," she said softly. I stepped back as if her touch would burn me. That's when she knew. Her face changed, the concern vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "He told you, didn't he? That weak old man." I told him everything, my voice finally steady, hardened by the concrete that was now setting around my heart. The gambling debt, the whole story about the house being a lie, your lie. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She crossed her arms, defiant. "I did it for my family. What was I supposed to do?" "Let them be ruined because of his stupidity? You had the money, Alex. It was just sitting there." "It was for us," I yelled, the sound echoing in our small living room. "For our house, our future. It was from my grandmother." "And now it's helping my family," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You should be proud. You saved them." The conversation was over. I saw her for what she was, a stranger, a predator who had seen my love not as a gift, but as a weakness to be exploited. I slept on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling until the sun came up, feeling utterly and completely alone. The next morning, I called my best friend, Mark. I told him everything, my voice breaking as I recounted the conversation with her father, the coldness in her eyes. He listened patiently, and when I was done, he didn't say, "I told you so." He just said, "I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there." Mark came over with coffee and a plan. He was furious, but his anger was focused. "This isn't just a betrayal, Alex. This is fraud. You have a case." He helped me make a call to a lawyer he knew. The lawyer confirmed it. What they did was a criminal offense, wire fraud, based on a deliberately false story to obtain money. Armed with that knowledge, I felt a flicker of strength return. This wasn't just about my broken heart anymore. It was about justice. It was about the memory of my grandmother, whose final gift had been used to fuel a lie. I packed a bag and went to stay with Mark. I couldn't breathe in the same air as her anymore. A few days later, I arranged to meet them. Not just Sarah, but their parents too. I told them to meet me at their house, the house I had supposedly saved. When I walked in, they were all sitting in the living room, a united front of deceit. Sarah looked smug, as if she thought I had come to crawl back. I didn't waste time. "I spoke to a lawyer," I said calmly, watching as the color drained from their faces. "What you did is called fraud. It carries a prison sentence. I have bank records. I have a witness." I looked directly at her father. "And I have a text history of Sarah describing this fake crisis in detail." Her mother, Carol, started to cry. "Please, Alex, we can't go through that. Robert's health." I held up a hand. "You have one chance," I said, my voice cold as steel. "You will transfer every single cent of my inheritance back into my account by the end of business today. If you do, I will walk away, file for divorce, and you will never see or hear from me again. If you don't, my lawyer will file a police report this evening." Sarah scoffed. "You wouldn't do that. You love me." I looked right into her eyes, and for the first time, I felt nothing but pity for her. "The man who loved you wouldn't have been lied to like this. You killed him. Now you're just dealing with me." The fight went out of him. They knew I was serious. Her father, looking 10 years older, just nodded slowly. Within 3 hours, I got a notification from my bank. The full amount was back in my account. I filed for divorce the next day. I never spoke to any of them again. Mark told me later that the shame of it all finally forced her father to get help for his addiction, but the family was shattered beyond repair. I learned a hard lesson. A sacrifice made for love is beautiful, but a sacrifice demanded by deception is just theft. It took a long time to heal, but I did. I eventually bought a small house, just for me. It's quiet, but it's honest, and it was built on my own hard work, not on a foundation of lies. Have you ever given everything for someone, only to discover you were just a means to an end? Until the next story,